All right, at this time, we'll call to order the City of Kenai Planning and Zoning Commission meeting for February 26th, 2020. Will you stand for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Item A2, roll call, please.
Chairman Twait,
Here.
Vice Chairman Fikes. Here. Commissioner Springer, absent. Commissioner McIntyre,
Here.
Commissioner Greenberg,
Here.
Commissioner Halstead,
Here.
and Commissioner Askin is absent.
Voice of God.
Chairman, you have a quorum.
All right, thank you. Item A3, agenda approval. Wishes of the commission. Commissioner Halstead.
I move we approve the agenda as presented.
All right, we have a second.
Second.
Any objection? Seeing none, the agenda is approved. Item A4, consent agenda. Commissioner Halstead.
I move we approve the consent agenda.
And a second.
Second.
Any objection? Seeing none, the consent agenda is approved. Moves us down to item C, scheduled public comment. We have none. Item D, unscheduled public comment. Anyone wishing to magically appear and speak for 3 minutes? Seeing none, we will move along. Items E, consideration of plats, F, public hearings, and G, unfinished business. We have none. Takes us to item H, new business. H1 is a discussion recommendation authorizing the city planner to draft and send a letter to the Kenai Peninsula Borough supporting a request by the developers of Windhaven Estates Phase 3 for a 2-year time extension. Staff report.
Thank you, Chair Twait. So Hall Building LLC is the developer of Windhaven Estates Phase 3. There's a memo regarding the time extension request on page 11 of the packet, or sorry, page 10. And then page 11 is the borough letter asking the city for their input on the extension. And the plat in question is on page 13. So the Windhaven Estates Phase 3 plat, it was first granted preliminary approval in 1998, and there's been assorted extensions over the years, and different phases of the plats have been approved. So the commission might remember the most recent one that it carved out some lots off of Schuyler, but the original plat is still out there as a preliminary plat. The developer is allowed to request time extensions, and the city does not feel that there's any reason to deny an extension. Just a little bit more background information. The subdivision was originally named the Tanglewood subdivision, and the borough letter outlines the dates of the assorted extensions and phases. And the letter from the borough, or perhaps it was my memo, somewhere in the materials in the packet, I just noted that for this plat to receive final approval, the city and the developer would have to work out approval of the sewer line through the subdivision as part of the installation agreement. And after this extension, the plat would become under new borough code, which does limit the number of time extension requests. If I remember correctly, it would be a 6-year limit, and then plats, I'll see if I can get this right. I think I just had a meeting today that covered the changes to the borough code for subdivisions. Maybe it was 10 years, but there would be some sort of time limit to the number of extensions. But for this one, city administration is recommending approval, and we don't see any reason not to grant the developer an extension. That's the end of my staff report.
All right. Can we get a motion, please? Commissioner Halstead.
I just need help in this motion because it's not just approving the recommendation is what we would be asking for.
Yeah. Yep. just
Okay, so I move that we,
Authorizing recommendation, or authorizing,
I guess I move that we approve the discussion / recommendation authorizing the city planner to draft and send a letter to the Kenai Peninsula Borough supporting a request by the developers for Windhaven Estates Phase 3 for a 2-year time extension.
do we have a second?
I'll second.
Second. All right, any discussion?
I have a
Commissioner Halsted?
just, I mean, it does seem like a lot of extensions, but there is also a lot of growth going on there, right? So it's not like 1 or 2 lots. We're looking at a massive, what I would consider to be a fairly major subdivision. I think it seems applicable because they are continuing to grow and develop that, so I don't see an issue with approving it. Seems pretty standard.
Any other discussion? Commissioner McIntyre?
So, is this in a RR1 area?
No, it's RS1 probably, huh?
Yeah, that's, I could check really quick.
They're about 13,000 square foot lots, I know, so they're not
Not big enough?
big enough for R1. Do you know?
I can confirm that this area of the city is not in RR1 because there's 2 areas that are in RR1, and one of them is far out on the Kenai Spur Highway.
And then VIP, right?
Yeah, and then the other area is closer in town, but it's near the high school. Yeah, the MAP subdivision. So I know for certain that this area is not in the RR1 zone. It probably is the RS, which is suburban residential. I'd have to pull up the zoning map really quick to double check.
My assistant will have it here in a second.
Okay, it's right here, huh?
It is.
Let's read out
It's orange.
orange, yeah, it's suburban residential.
Suburban residential, so
What
it's
category?
RS something, yeah.
So do we, just for my own information, do we know, are they planning to, have they proposed to continue development like they've done on these other areas over here, right next to it? Because I think they did those also. I'm looking at the map. on-
Yeah, and I guess what I know of it, since I live at the back end of that subdivision, is I think the only real holdup, the development's planning to go forward, I think exactly like it's proposed, once they can figure out this sewer issue that's a problem from Juliana down to Schuyler, down near Redoubt there, I believe.
And money's a budget for that.
Yeah, so.
When you say the sewer issue,
It's, I think, from what I understand, you should be able to look down the manholes, shine a light, manhole to manhole. Should have a nice straight sewer pipe.
Yeah.
I think what they have are, they have some bellies and bows in it that need to be dealt with. Is what if I remember it correctly from a long time ago.
Yes, if I could jump in,
Yep.
Chair Twait. Yes, I can confirm that's correct. The issue, the development is, as far as I know, the developer is still planning to build as is outlined on the plat on page 13. There is an existing sewer line that is there, but it curves a bit, and so exactly what Chair Twait said. Someone's going to have to pay for that, and the city and the developer will have to come to an agreement with an installation agreement before the plat would be accepted. So this just gives more time. And the developer has built out the lots where an agreement has been reached with the city to use the installed sewer line. And I know the 3 lots that the commission approved recently, I know that there were gravel pads put in so far this year.
Any other discussion? Seeing none, please call the roll.
Commissioner Greenberg,
yes.
Commissioner McIntyre,
Yes.
Commissioner Halsted,
Yes.
Vice Chairman Fikes?
Yes.
Chairman Twait?
Yes.
Motion passes.
All right, we will move along. Item I, pending items, we have none. J, reports. J1, City Council, Councilman Glenn Denning.
Thank you, Chairman Twait. On the 19th of February, the City Council met in its regular session here in the quarters. We had a proclamation for Women's Voting Rights Day, 100 years since the constitutional amendment recognizing women's right to vote was passed. So we had was the Women League of Voters came and we had a proclamation and presented them with a certificate. And it was very well received and very timely, very positive. Tim Dillon came and updated us on the Economic Development District. He had a slideshow, and basically what he did, it somewhat mirrors our comprehensive plan, but it's a little more specific as to business opportunities and the type of information that you would reveal if you were trying to, say, attract a small business to come here, say an accounting firm or a doctor, engineering firm, something like that. And then also if someone's considering moving into the area, it will reveal certain highlights, not only of Kenai, but in their case, it talks about be sold out and then on down to Seward and over to Homer and stuff. So it's more comprehensive for the Kenai Peninsula Borough. But it was very well presented and very well received. Tim does a very good job in promoting small business on the peninsula. He has a building over there. It was a former office and shop area for Atlantic Richfield when they had a larger presence here all those years ago. And what they make their money by just renting out certain areas in the building for incubation. If you notice, the truck driving school is there and things like that. So, you guys okay? Yeah. Okay. And so anyway, I won't belabor it anymore, other than to say that also he is on a committee for public awareness for the excuse me census that's coming up here in a month or two. We enacted an ordinance accepting and appropriating a grant from the Alaska State Library for employee travel, accepted and appropriating a federal grant from the Institute of Museum and Library Services passed through Alaska State Library for employee travel and training. We enacted unanimously and accepted and appropriated 2 donations from the Totem Tracers and Friends of the Library for community upgrade to the library equipment. One item was during the last earthquake, we noticed that some of the shelves in there weren't very stable, or as stable as they could be, and so they found a way to get brackets and locate them to where they could be fastened more securely, so they wouldn't fall over on anybody should we have another earthquake. We adopted unanimously requesting the state of Alaska provide necessary funding to the Alaska wing of the Civil Air Patrol at a minimum of $184,000 to provide support for utility costs, insurance premiums, and emergency repair. What had happened is the state just zeroed out the budget for the Civil Air Patrol. Okay, and they're responsible for air safety, air recovery, and whatnot. And if a lot of those funds aren't restored, then certain of these facilities are going to be mothballed, and response time will be greatly lengthened, and it will put safety of the flying public in jeopardy. And there is a mandate that this be taken care of, but I'm not going to make a political speech, but it should be taken care of. They've been here since 1950, I believe, the CAP. And Joe, do you know any more about it? I just know that they do a good service. Henry usually is here, and he's the one that sponsored the ordinance. And a copy of this has been passed to all the city clerks in the state. And I noticed on the Borough Assembly agenda for yesterday, it was also there and approved as a recommendation. So Then we adopted unanimously a resolution supporting the collection of sales tax from remote sellers by the Kenai Peninsula Borough and other municipalities within the borough, authorizing the Remote Seller Sales Tax Commission to implement, administer, and enforce provisions of the Uniform Remote Seller Sales Tax Code on the city's behalf, and affirming the city's adoption by reference of the Kenai Peninsula Borough's Uniform Seller Sales Tax. And I believe Counselor Naxted covered this in a previous meeting, and this is just a sausage making sure that our position is clear. I think there was one amendment or something that was requested by the borough, and we all signed on to it. So Amazon or somebody, sells within the borough, then we will be able to collect that sales tax, and there's a mechanism to do that. And it'll be equitably applied, and we should gain some benefit from that. And then we adopted unanimously authorizing a budget transfer in the general fund for buildings and departmental departments for building repairs in excess of budgeted amounts. Just an example, notice our door has been repaired outside here. Okay, everybody was fighting that, and now it's maybe actually a little too securely, but it's there. Over at the senior center, there was a door between the congregate housing and the senior center, and they just found a way to have a remote opening instead of someone in a wheelchair having to fight the door open or have it open for them. And it made quite a bit of difference in the convenience and the safety of the people over there. So it was just items that cropped up, had to be done. There's in excess of budget, and we had funds we could appropriate to take care of that. It wasn't a lot of dollars, but it was timely application of the money. Let's see here. We had, let's see, what do we have? We had here, we introduced on the consent agenda authorizing city manager to reimburse annual leave used by a firefighter for attending a paramedic internship. We introduced and referred to the Harbor Commission amending Title 11 Harbor and Harbor Facilities to remove provisions that are no longer historically relevant, recognizes changes to other chapters of city code that now provide for lease and sale of harbor lands, and provide the Harbor Commission a platform to move forward. And so that was referred to the Harbor Commission. They've been all over it now for these 2 years. They'll look at what's been presented to them, adopt it, send it back to the council, and we'll approve it, and it will become code for the city. I think Elizabeth you're gonna talk during your session, during your time about the Title 11, that you're gonna bring forward what, just a working copy of it, to show, or do you want me to read? I can read.
Yeah, if you could go, sorry. Councilmember Glendinning, if you could just, if you could give a recap, because I couldn't add it as an agenda item, so
Oh, okay.
I didn't,
All right, well, I'll just blurt something out.
yeah.
I'll just blurt something out here then. Just to give you a flavor of it, this is Title 11, okay, and we're condensing it down to about like this. And I will just read from the ordinance, the whereas. An ordinance of the City Council amending, I already said this, recognize chapters of the city code that now provide for lease and sale of harbor lands and provide the Harbor Commission a platform to move forward. And here's the history of it. Whereas on January 6, 1977, the state conveyed certain tidelands and submerged lands to the city. And whereas the conveyance came responsibility for the city, including surveying, platting, and adjudication of commercial fisheries rights, and whereas many of these responsibilities codified in Title 11 Harbor and Harbor Facilities were required to be completed within a 2-year period or less, and whereas there is no longer a need to maintain in city code ordinances pertaining to a process that expired over 30 years ago, and whereas the city recently updated Title 22 city-owned lands, which now encompass the sale, lease, and acquisition of harbor lands, negating the need for separate provisions for the same in Title 11. And whereas City Harbor Commission has long recognized a need for clarification and focus in its duties, and whereas the most recent review of Title 11 by the Harbor Commission and its subcommittee in 2019 recommended many of the revisions to the title, recognizing the expertise of other city bodies in land use and planning, and a desire for focus on regulation of a harbor and its associated activities. Whereas removing provisions from Title 11 that are no longer necessary is intended to be the first step in allowing the Harbor Commission to focus on harbor-related projects and activities and move forward with future potential recommended code changes relevant to such projects and activities. In other words, we're going to, on the Harbor Commission, we're going to focus, pivot and refocus on duties and responsibilities that pertain to, say, staying interested in the bluff erosion project. Pushing the city administration to follow through with the Corps of Engineers to dredge our harbor out. We're being active in the PU fishery, specifically with water safety, and making sure that, of course, the tideland leases are looked after, and just being a general advocate for all activities on the waterfront. And this includes not only the commercial activities are there, but also the sport fishing that is prevalent. A lot of people use our facility to launch their boats and then go upstream. And with that ends my report. I have more to read, but we can present it to you in the next meeting in a digested form. I think what'll happen is, what we can do is we have the old Title 11, and it has, as it was written, and then in red is written the reasons why it's being retained or why it's being discarded. And I think that'll be useful for your understanding. And as you go through it, it'll a little dry, but it'll understand that perhaps land use adjudication is more in your bailiwick than with the harbor. You have the expertise and the depth and actually the authority now in Title 22 to manage all things land within the city of Kenai. So,
Any questions? Commissioner McIntyre.
I have a couple. I don't know that we can answer them here, but coming back to the sales tax issue, so I'm curious about, I have been ever since this was brought up months ago, how does collection work? Because right now, say for example, I buy something on Amazon, they estimate the tax, and I'm assuming they do that based on my zip code that I put in for my billing.
yeah. It'd be the zip code and the 4 numbers, and that pins it down to where you are. Say again?
There is no 4 digit. 4 digit is only a post office assignment, so he is correct in the reference for.
I have a 4-digit, and I live in Woodland. I have 4 digits behind mine.
Right, but their billing is only gonna recognize the 99611.
That's not what I was told. That because there's people live in the Kiski that have Kenai 99611. So that's why it'll be.
Borough versus the city.
And the borough is the administrator, it's the collector of it, and it's just as the sales tax is collected and administered now. The money is collected at the stores, goes to the borough, and then they adjudicate the amounts that come to each city. Each city has a little different sales tax scheme. Ours is 3%, and the borough gets 3%, total 6%.
I see. So The only question where it sort of got me confused is, okay, so if I go to Anchorage and I buy something, there's no sales tax.
Right.
If I take my computer up there and I go onto Amazon and I buy something, technically, should there be a sales tax? Because I'm up there, I'm not here.
If it, yeah, I would say if it gets delivered up there, there's no sales tax. If it comes here, then there's sales tax.
I see, so it's a point of delivery,
I believe
not
that's,
the point
that's
of
how,
purchase.
that's how I understand it.
Okay.
That's where the zip code comes in.
That's where zip code comes in, yes.
Well, except they ask for two things. They ask for your billing zip code, and then they give you a separate address for delivery. You can deliver it anywhere you want.
I would suggest it'd be the billing then,
Yeah.
because that's where the financial transaction happens.
Interesting. Okay. Well, it'll be interesting to see how that plays out. And if we actually get the money that they collect.
If it comes to the borough, we'll get it. Yeah, it'll be.
If the borough can get it,
The borough will be the main collector, and then they'll distribute it to us. So we have really no part in the administration of it.
Yeah.
Just, we had, some input as to how it was to be managed and all of this.
The next question I had goes back to the CAP. You
Yes.
mentioned that, who mandated CAP? Is that a federal mandate?
Yeah, let's see if I can find it here.
And while you're looking that up, the reason why I ask is, so if the state zeroes out the budget and Kenai starts picking up part of the tab for that or contributing to that, and who becomes liable in the event of there being an inadequate safety response, say with an accident or something like that? Since the state has thrown their hands up and said,
Spurned its obligation.
yeah, yeah.
That's a very good question. The Civil Air Patrol is an official civilian auxiliary volunteer of the United States Air Force. Okay, with over 750 members statewide, including approximately 140 aircrew, 255 cadets, and 464 emergency responders and 18 aircraft. And they provide 50% of the search and rescue and provides aerospace education for youth. So it's a function of, there's an Air Force component, for example, the commander of the CAP here has a major's insignia. They're not regular military, but they are quasi-military. Let's see. The state is responsible for search and rescue within the state pursuant to state law, and for conducting and managing search and rescue operations are one of the 8 core missions of the Alaska State Troopers, and whereas statute blah, blah, blah provides for the Department of Safety shall make necessary administrative arrangements for retaining liaison between the state and Civil Air Patrol, the expenditure of money appropriate to the Department for State contribution towards the support of authorized activities of the Alaska Wing Civil Air Patrol under its charter, and without the financial assistance, as I said, they'll have to go in cold storage. So it's a collaboration between troopers. They don't fly parallel missions. They will coordinate their activities, but it puts more eyes and aircraft in the air should something happen. So it's I was at the Borough Assembly last night, and one of the assemblymen said, "Oh yeah, in 1972, beach fishing, and my partner got caught up in the surf and passed away, and the Civil Air Patrol came and took him, to the I believe, yeah, there was a hospital in Solana then, took him there. So I've just always known that they were here and just assumed it would be taken care of, but I didn't realize it was that precarious that it'd be a budget item. They're just asking for money to repair the roof and the insurances and a little help with their administration. It's largely a volunteer organization, and most generally those folks reach in their own pocket and provide. So I am a little distressed by the trimming back at the state level of necessary state functions. I mean, there's certain things that the state does, you know, the safety, infrastructure, schools, these type of things, and I fail to understand the thrust of this administration to cut such things out. You got more questions for me, right?
So it is, I know, same thing, it is a function, a component of Department of Public Safety is where it's mandated from the statute though, so. Makes no
Just
sense.
one more thing. There was a colonel that wrote a letter, the background paper on Alaska Wing Civil Air Control funding shortfall. And it says here, with the Alaska Wing of the Civil Air Patrol was removed by the governor's office. Consequently, all 16 AKWG units have been directed to pay for their own utilities and facility maintenance, whereas AKWG previously subsidized these expenses from grant funds. Without obtaining additional funding, the ability to execute timely airport and ground search and rescue missions from outlying locations will be significantly degraded, and that includes Kenai. Points west, points south. So it's a big deal, and it's not much money, and they provide a good and valuable safety service.
All right, any other questions? Commissioner Halsted?
Thank you, Mr. Glendaney. My understanding is the Civil Air Patrol, we just have the Kenai location, right? There's not one in Soldotna Airport or anything in Nikiski?
No, it's consolidated here. It's been here in this location since 1950, and 1950, Nikiski, they may have had, Homesteader may have had a little landing strip, and Soldotna did not have an active airport at that time. This airport here was conceived as a military base. They started clearing ground here in 1937, so it was a logical place to have the Civil Air Patrol and its associated, which actually was a civil defense operation during the Cold War and Korean War and even into Vietnam. So it's logical that it should be here. They have ground dedicated to them at the airport, I think about 5 acres, that is specifically carved out for the Civil Air Patrol. So it's an important feature of our town and our borough.
I thought it was interesting that the old ball fields or the softball fields were the old airport. So if you dig deep enough, you'll get tarmac. That's an interesting
that's-
history of the
That's
that
true.
airport
That's true.
there.
They had the old Marston mats too. These metal things that just look like strainers, I guess, and you buckle them together. Okay, and when they paved the airport, I think they first paved it in '63 or something like that. The call went out, "Hey, come get the Marston mats," and homesteaders came from all around and pulled these things up and took them. They used them to drive on them, and because during breakup and whatnot, the roads weren't that good. So I mean, they were going like in a weekend. But yeah, I remember a buddy of mine telling me that he was a banker, and he'd fly in from Kodiak and land in his 180 or whatever, and just kind of taxi up and go over, taxi almost to where the bank was, and it's roughly where Alaska State Bank is now. Yeah, it was a little more close coupled. The old airport terminal was, where the dry cleaners is, and the building behind it is like a daycare. That was the terminal until about 1967, something like that. So, yeah.
It's pretty amazing stuff. Also, my understanding of the sales tax issue was this was really giving, I guess, individuals more resources to be able to collect taxes. Amazon, I think, was one of the very few that actually gave us the sales tax that they charged, if that was my understanding. And this just basically gave us more resources to, I guess, get monies that would be owed to us, right?
Right. There was a lawsuit. It was South Dakota versus Wayfair, which allowed a collection and remittance of sales tax on goods and services sold by remote sellers in municipalities to collect sales tax from remote sellers in compliance with the decision of the Supreme Court by South Dakota versus Wayfair. In other words, there was many many communities in South Dakota, which is largely rural, that found that their own commerce and brick and mortar stores were suffering because of the mail order, for want of a better term, but also the city revenues were failing, and they couldn't provide the services that they had promised to the citizens. So they and others combined in this lawsuit, and it was confirmed by the state, the Supreme Court of the United States, that a sales tax could be collected from such as Amazon.
Maybe the state could add another 3% and make some money themselves. How about that? Wouldn't hurt any of us. We'll move along now.
Because I have a reason why.
Okay, good.
I'll tell you later.
All right. J2, Kenai Peninsula Borough Planning, Vice Chair Fikes.
Alrighty, we met on February 24th, and we reviewed 2 plats and passed them, and we had a full docket. We were looking at going through the upcoming land sale. So the borough has several properties each year that they classify, and then they carve off and have a land sale. And so we were going through them and making sure that we had the appropriate classifications that seemed to match the sale. So if we had something that was in a rural, was it truly rural? Did it have any kind of wetlands attached to it, or was it in a floodplain, or did it back up to a utility easement or something? So we took quite a bit of the evening going through that and ultimately got through it. And then what took up the rest of the evening was, once again, everybody's favorite, the Anchor Point Beachcomber LLC gravel pit ordinance that Mr. Trimmel once again brought forth, that we had reviewed and denied, and then it was appealed, and then we reviewed it again, and then it was passed. And now it's brought back, because now that it's been passed, he would like to get an extension of that, so that it's not such a small area to process, that he needs a little bit more area, and that's gonna stretch right out onto the beach right there in Anchor Point. And so once again, we had the whole community come out, and once again, we got reminded that it's going through the courts, and so you got all kinds of attorneys represented by several property owners, as well as this individual who keeps clamoring for property rights. And my humble opinion, the whole process was kind of the seed for that whole committee, if you will. The gravel pit committee was because we felt that, you know, each time one of these folks comes to the borough or the cities, and you sit through testimony after testimony, and you want to try and have something that you can say, well, this is a code, or this is a regulation that we can say that this is, you know, going to be a standard, and it's going to meet it, or it's not going to meet it. And so through that process, it came out. But anywho, we decided that we just didn't have enough folks on the commission that night. We had quite a few absences, so in all fairness to all parties, it would be best if we postponed it and reviewed it again in March, giving the courts a little bit more time possibly to make a decision one way or the other. You know, obviously the applicant still has all the rights that he can proceed with an extension, and so that's what we did. We tabled it until March, and we got through the rest of the land sales, and then we adjourned.
Very good. Any questions?
Mr. Glendenning.
Mr. Glendenning.
Yeah, did I not read in the paper that the local Land Use Commission in Anchor Point approved it?
Yes, and that was kind of a hard thing to adjust to, because there was, and I do have some letters from, there is an Anchor Point advisory. I believe there's a Cooper Landing one. There's even a K Beach advisory. This particular one, which helps us at the borough level to get that local understanding and acceptance of it. And so it was baffling to me that that commission said, yeah, we're all for it, we got a green light. And then you start flipping through the letters of opposition and testimony, and here's one from somebody who says that there's a Open Meetings Act, that they complained because one of the advisory folks was invited to come out and do an on-site visit, but only that one individual, not the rest of them. So is that an issue now? And was it a fair decision if only one of them got to, you know? So there was a whole lot of back and forth in politics, it just kind of muddied the water for trying to get through the testimony and everything. So it was probably, in my opinion, a good thing that we postponed it so we get a little more time to try and review it. Like I say, it was kind of a full agenda to be on top of the land sale, which really took a lot of the evening, and then to try and kind of get through something as controversial as that. So it's probably a good thing, and it'll come back around in March.
Good luck.
Yeah, yeah. We'll see who's absent that day.
Yeah, exactly. Now that you know.
Yeah.
All right, anyone else? All right, thank you. Move on to J3, City Administration. Mrs. Appleby.
Thank you. I attended a session today that was to discuss some forthcoming changes in the Borough Subdivision Code. So they're different than when Max Best and Scott Huff from the borough presented to us. Those ones are still on the docket, but they're coming back to the assembly. These are just some minor tweaks in the way plats are submitted. I don't think it'll really impact what the city does. I did discuss just the process for the feedback they want from the city for vacations of utility easements and right-of-ways. And there are a few other things that made me actually think that at some point maybe we should look at our code to see if that could spur changes. But I thought it was a good meeting. I wanted to highlight some upcoming city meetings. So for city staff, the marketing team will be presenting, and the team had presented at a city council meeting, and I think they're doing really great stuff. They came up with a new branding logo for the city. We have a tagline, how do you Alaska? Or best place to Alaska is Kenai. Sorry, that was, they filmed some city staff like recreating, and that's what they wanted me to say. So no, that's in my head, but it's Kenai is the best place to Alaska. So they're giving a presentation. I don't know if there will be further ones for the public. I'm guessing there might be. Some two that are open for the public that are outside of normal city council meetings. At the Kenai Chamber meeting on March 4th, the mayor and city manager will be presenting or giving the state of the city. And then on March 10th, Invest in Kenai is at 6 p.m. and it will start going over budget considerations for the next fiscal year, which will start on July 1st of this year. And then I also attended today the census group that Councilmember Glendenning had mentioned that KPED heads up. The census starts in March, so I came away with just some posters to put at the library and the senior center in Kenai, and I'd encourage all of you to fill out your census forms, and encourage friends and neighbors to do so too, because the census determines how much funding we get, because a lot of it is population-based, so it's really important that we count everyone in Kenai, including hard-to-count populations, so people experiencing homelessness, just people who might be hard to reach, and all of the data is confidential, protected by federal law, and it's you actually give out less personal information than you do when you fill out the application for the PFD. So I just wanted to reiterate those points on the census. And then just a few other things. I'm meeting at the end of this week to talk about creating a business guide. So when someone wants to start a business in Kenai, we could give them a packet of some sort, and it would help them navigate who to talk to, whether it's planning and zoning or the building inspector or public works, and just something that makes it a little bit easier to digest than all of the various forms. So hopefully that we'll end up with a good product out of that. And then just some other lands things. I had mentioned at the last meeting that the deadline for leases within the airport reserve had come up, and that the city also got some press recently for our lease incentive program. I think there was an article in the Clarion a few days ago, and there's a spot on the radio, and that had spurred increased calls to the city about leasing with an option to purchase of city lands. So I'd been talking to several of those people over the past week or two, and so I'm excited that we got some press for that. And there will be a pending lease application at the next Planning and Zoning Commission meeting. So I think it's just a result of the code changes that were made, because we now have this standard lease form and we have our development incentive program that didn't exist before. And for certain parcels, we now have an option where you can have a lease that gives you the ability to purchase the land once you complete development. So I think it's exciting to see that the policy changes are actually, they're spurring action within the business community. Anyway, just again, those dates were Chamber of Commerce meeting March 4th for State of the City, and then Invest in Kenai budget is March 10th in the evening. And that is the end of my staff or administrative report.
Any questions? Commissioner McIntyre?
Will that State of the City address be on the radio?
That is a good question, because it's at the chamber.
Mayor Sikorsky usually, we could ask that it happen.
Yeah, because I think it would be good for.
In the past it
yeah.
has, but that's a very good question. You know,
I'll bring that forward and I'll let the commission know. If maybe it's not a live stream on the radio, then maybe there's at least like a YouTube video if you want to hear the address. I'll look into that.
Commissioner Halsted?
Do these cameras record a stream of the meetings as they take place?
right now, yeah. Well, yeah.
Honey, I'm here.
Well, I told my wife I was going out. She didn't know.
Documented evidence. All right, anything else? All right, we will move along. Additional public comments, no one out there. We have no informational items. Next meeting, March 11th.
Henry will be here.
He will?
Yeah, I'm just a substitute teacher.
Okay. All right, commissioners' comments and questions. Commissioner McIntyre.
I'm good, thanks.
Commissioner Halsted.
I just wanted to welcome you back, Mr. Twade. I'm glad you found the place.
Felt a little weird walking in here. Yeah. Commissioner Greenberg.
Yeah, I'd like to follow up on what Tim was saying before about the figuring out how that actually works with the sales tax. You know, where it comes in. And I think you probably could do that through, and just to see the effects of that after time. When does that get implemented, and when does it when we'll be able to see like measurable results? I'd kind of like to see that.
Yeah, I understand funds are being collected now, so I would say the second quarter, we should start seeing some reimbursements.
Do they have any estimated amounts? Any
Not
ideas?
not really. Not really. It'll be in seven figures for the borough.
I remember the South Dakota one saying that they had collected, when they got that settled, like $8 million throughout the state. So I don't know how that was divvied up through state and local, but it's pretty substantial.
Going to Jim, though, isn't it?
Absolutely. Yeah. Buy a new Ford with it.
I got a big rust spot on my fender, so I know you'd feel sorry for me.
All right, Vice Chair Fikes.
I just had a question for Glenn Denning, similar on the tax structure, but more towards the cannabis. Is there any definitive numbers from the council on what we've collected for the city for cannabis?
No, I could find out though.
Yeah, I'd be curious of what
Yeah,
that looks
see
like.
if it's. I don't know if it's broke out that way. It should be because it'd
If
be-
it's not broke out that way, if it's broke out by the borough or however
it
it
would
may
be. It's a borough function.
Okay.
And then we could maybe, back it and see what comes to us, but that's a good question. We can come up with that number, because it's something that I know folks would be interested in tracking.
Yeah. And then I forgot to mention, there was a nice presentation at the borough meeting for a gentleman who took over the managing director spot for the Kenai River Center. And I did not realize, but I guess they had quite the staff shakeup. They had 3 folks that left, retired, or went somewhere. So he stepped up from one of the positions he held there and took over the director's spot, and then I believe he said they're looking to fill the other two. Nancy's still there, though.
She's got her eye on the prize at the end
I
of
was
the
gonna
day.
say, I do recall that, so. No. But one thing he did bring up, that sometimes we have applicants come forward with, building issues, close to the river, and so we would get a lot of, comments from folks at the, one representative from the River Center, and then all of a sudden you get the staff report. And so it was kinda nice to hear from him that he wants his department to run everything through the borough planners, Max Best and those folks, and then present it to us at the commission, and then he will be available in the audience if need be with other questions to kind of streamline things. So that was really nice to hear that.
Yeah, when I was on the planning commission, it got a little top-heavy because you almost had competing staff reports.
It did, and I do recall, and just not to pick on the folks in Poacher's Cove, but we would get a lot of folks that would want to take down a shed or add a shed, and, you know, their presentation at the River Center would be this, and then you get staff report, and they would conflict, and then we're sitting here, and again, it takes up all of our time for that session. So, yeah, I was grateful to hear that that's going to be a
Yeah, the
focus
little bit I
point.
know about it, I think it would work best if Max was the 51%er, and they speak with one voice regarding these common issues.
Yeah, that was really what he was driving. I just know his last name's Lucas. I didn't catch his first name.
It's, I'll interject. It's Lucas Biker.
Okay.
Yeah, because I worked with him on a couple of our gravel pits. I went out on site visits, and he's been really great to work with.
Yeah, he seems really on point, very knowledgeable, so, yeah, excited. That's all I got.
Okay, I have nothing else. We almost made it an hour. Business completed, the meeting is adjourned. If you
I saw Jeff in the yard the other day, and I was teasing him that I was looking at the comprehensive plan, and his eyes rolled back, right? But what I found is that we just have like barely a page describing our harbor, okay? And the borough's comprehensive plan has a page and a half, almost 2 pages. So I'm thinking that maybe there's something we can do just to fill out and expand the commercial and recreational availability of our waterfront. And I don't know when that'll happen, but it's something that we'll be working on. We're encouraged to work with our comprehensive plan, and this is a ripe target, so.
dismissed.